The announced merger of Tech Data and SYNNEX has rocked the distributor world. RedNight President Chris Ploessel is here to talk about that, the reaction from Ingram Micro and D&H, and more. Plus, a special guest interview with Zomentum Channel Chief Ted Roller. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 180, Scuba Diving Siths. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly episode 180. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine program for you. And who are you? Well, you are the VARs, the integrators, the IT service providers, the IT business consultants, the computer repair technicians, the break fix shop owners. You are any of those, and perhaps many of those. What you are not is you are not a sous chef in a French kitchen. But if you are, I do take samples, send them my way, as many as you got. I love the good eats. But if you are a French sous chef, you're still welcome to hang around and listen in and enjoy the dialogue, go through the news with us with not one, but two fine folks we have here today. First up is the man of the hour, the man who's usually around, executive editor, Rich Freeman.
And I'll take samples of more or less anything. Food is probably, top of the list, but why stop there?
Why stop there? And, I was just thinking, when I said French shoe stuff, I'm like, man, what was the last time I was at a good French restaurant? And it's been a long time. Rich, do you have a good French place by you?
Yes. I mean, there are a bunch of them here in Seattle, but yeah. So we'll put that on the list. When you come out here to watch hockey with me, we'll get French food somewhere in Seattle.
We need to do that because I got to tell you, around here, a good French place is a good hour and something away. And actually, I don't even know if they're open anymore because of all the COVID shut so many of the restaurants down around here. So we'll have to go and do that. But yeah, put French restaurant Seattle on the list, and we'll do that when we get together. So, Rich, how are things? What's going on with you?
Things are good. We're still in that things are the same this week as last week mode that we've been in for a good solid year here, but that's just fine. And we're the light at the end of the tunnel, as I think we've discussed recently, is it's getting brighter all the time.
It is. And are you still wandering the apartment at night and talking to stuffed iguanas out of loneliness, or are you getting out more?
Yeah, now I talk to random strangers on the street.
Always a safe thing to do, especially in downtown Seattle. So I encourage more of that behavior. I'm kidding, by the way. Rich, you know what I'm most excited about? We are not alone today. See, I was looking at the show sheet earlier, and didn't see a guest host name, and I was like, oh well, 2 weeks in a row without a guest, that's just not like us. That doesn't happen. And lo and behold, when I got on, a face appeared, and it wasn't yours. And I'm not saying that I didn't want to see your face, but I like to see multiple faces when we do this show. So I'm very, very excited we have a guest host. It was a nice surprise for me. With more than 20 years in the IT industry, his strengths and experiences include the enhancement of revenue generation and cost reduction initiatives through innovative technology planning and re-architecture. He has led major technology infrastructure conversions, directed enterprise-wide initiatives, and been responsible for crisis management, troubleshooting, acquisition, integration, and negotiations. It's a long list of accomplishments. So excited to have him here. Please welcome the president of RedNight Consulting, Chris Plossel. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. I've heard it pronounced a couple different ways.
Yeah, well, I always tell people it's like a plus sign and a letter L, Ploessel.
Ploessel. Well, I got it wrong, but I won't get it wrong later. Well,
that's okay.
I might get it wrong later. Who knows? Anything will happen. But Chris, welcome to the show. Glad to hear it. This is your first time on ChannelPro Weekly, correct?
It is. We've done a bunch of the events, but this is the first time on the podcast.
Awesome. Well, long overdue and glad you're here. I understand you are a regular listener, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a relatively new hobby with buying an electric bike, like many other people I think have done during the pandemic, and I'm riding it around town trying to get out of the house for any excuse to get out of the house, and I've been listening to it as I'm riding around town. It's been great.
Well, awesome. It'll be a surreal week when you download this episode and hear your own voice, so that'll be kind of interesting.
It's going to be exciting.
Awesome. Well, if you can, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what you do at RedNight Consulting, and a little bit more about you in general.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've been the president and co-founder of RedNight Consulting for 6 years now. The thing that we're a MSP focused on small businesses, like many of the listeners to your podcast. I think the thing that we're doing a little bit different is we're focused on cloud only. So we've partnered up very tightly with Amazon. web services, and we're doing the traditional MSP play with managing people's desktops and their servers, keeping them safe and secure and well performing. But the thing we're doing a little differently is guiding customers to the cloud with a much stronger hand, and we've been doing that for 4 or 5 years now. So I can honestly say today, none of our customers have on-premise servers at this point. So it's been pretty exciting. I've been in IT my whole career in different modes, between working at internal companies as IT directors, working at different VARs and consultants, and then started RedNight about 6 years ago with the main focus of being a cloud-only MSP, which was unheard of back then.
And it's an impressive feat to have clients that have no physical infrastructure. Did you go into this upfront with that goal, or is that just kind of where you've landed as you've grown?
No, it was a very diligent decision. I had previously come from a VAR where they were doing, I call it slinging gear, right? You have servers and storage and networking gear and all this stuff. And I just saw all these public cloud companies coming, and I saw like that is going to be a significant change in the industry, and it's going to be a big enough change that the bigger companies aren't going to be able to pivot fast enough. And you see that happening now with people trying to figure out how to do these very low margin products, right? The products are sort of disappearing, and it all has become a service business now. And so really focusing on not having to go on premise. And many of our engineers are very well versed in Amazon, but you ask them to do something that requires touching a physical server now, and they're like, we've never done that before. I don't know how to do it. It's a very strange world, but I think we've set ourselves up for success. And we did, because we started with no existing customers, it was very easy to transition in that way.
You not only set yourself up for success, you've actually succeeded to a really impressive degree. I have had this seat in the cheap seats almost from the very beginning of RedNight. It occurred to me before we went on the air. I was kind of thinking, well, when did I meet Chris? Because I've known you for a while, and we met at an Ingram Micro Cloud Summit. I want to say this is 2016. It might have been 2017. And so RedNight was a very young company still. And I remember we were at this cocktail reception, we were talking, and you were like, do you know anybody who's really sharp on cloud who I could meet? And I made an introduction. And these days, you're the guy who's really sharp on cloud, who, I might introduce somebody like you. I've watched as this idea, this vision that you had, came to life, blossomed, and you have really become, from my perspective at ChannelPro, one of the trailblazers, thought leaders in really going deep on cloud. It's been a really interesting thing to watch.
Yeah. We were standing in, I think it was Phoenix, out in the grass in the back of the hotel at an Ingram event, and I remember standing and meeting and talking to you that first time, and it probably was 2016. Good memory. It's been great. Shocker. I think that the two things we've been really kind of steadfast on is we want to be cloud only, and we want to focus on small business. And so by kind of sticking to our guns on those two things, the product sets have changed, and having to learn, train on different things has changed. But those two things have really done us well, and that kind of insight that we had from the beginning has really helped us survive through all this, because a lot of our customers were already in the cloud. I want to work from home. Go ahead. Like, there's nothing. I want to shut down my office. Great. Go ahead. There's nothing in there. So for our customer set, it's worked well. And, the hardest thing is to say no to deals that don't fit in that wheelhouse, right? I want a server on premise. No, sorry, we don't do that. Here's what we could do instead. Or, hey, we're 500 users. Oh my gosh, you want to work with it? You have 500 employees? That'd be great. But we kind of focus more on the small business, because, even in a head count, right? It's really different how you support MSP customers with different head counts. You get even in 10 to 20, 50 to 60, like those, they expect very different things. And when you get over 100, 200, 500 users, it's a whole different kind of company you want to work with. So kind of sticking to our guns and stand on the cloud only and small business has really helped us over the years grow.
So you were very early to cloud, and you're still, I think, unusual in the channel in the depth of your focus on cloud. The exclusiveness of your focus on cloud. But the other thing that's interesting you mentioned was that the big vendor partnership bet you've placed is with Amazon, and the ChannelPro audience has a a heavy tilt in the direction of Microsoft generally, and so a lot of people, working with Microsoft 365 and getting into Azure now. But you've really been gung-ho about AWS pretty much from the beginning, if I remember right. So I mean, talk a little bit about the thinking behind that when you made the decision to focus on the AWS stack, and what it's like partnering with that company.
Yeah, so right out of the gate, I had come from a shop where we had done a lot of Citrix. So this whole virtual desktop, remoting into servers to get people to work from anywhere. I really like that messaging. So right out of the gate, I was looking for a virtual desktop solution in 2016, 2015. And so we kind of looked at the big players. We looked at Google, we looked at Microsoft, we looked at Amazon. I knew I wanted to be on one of the hyperscaler kind of clouds. We went and did a bunch of poking around. Initially I was really excited about Google. I thought that was going to be an awesome. I went and visited a bunch of folks at their headquarters, and then reInvent happened, which is Amazon's big yearly conference. And I went to reInvent, and I just saw the ecosystem that was there. I saw how many people were excited to be developing solutions, and I saw that they had a canned virtual desktop product. So this was before the Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop thing existed. It was before Citrix even had any sort of SaaS kind of offerings. And that was kind of the aha moment for me. And so we attached onto that, tried it out, made sure it worked right. And then we just tied onto that. And a lot of times with customers, we're leading with this virtual desktop story. Work from any device, work from anywhere, have your apps and your servers all in a secure bubble in a cloud. Now, it doesn't matter if you lose your desktop device, buy another PC. I don't care if it's a Mac or a PC or a Chromebook, log in and connect to your virtual desktop product. And when we get customers to buy into that, all the rest of this stuff kind of just happens like, oh yeah, and of course our servers will go there also. Now, so the real reason for Amazon is because they were an early adopter of having a canned offering with a virtual desktop product. That's what got us there. Over time, they have kind of built up their partner network. In the last 6 to 12 months, it's been amazing. There really is a good partner ecosystem inside Amazon that you can get tied to. We're one of the early competency partners, they call it, certified partners to deliver their desktop product. So that helped out quite a bit as well. And working with them is really great. They have dedicated partner managers that help us solve problems. The biggest issue with these Microsoft, Google, and Amazon is there's so many moving pieces in there. You look at one of their dashboards, and it's like a dashboard of a 747 in there. All these switches and levers and things you can turn on, and it's like having a bucket full of Legos. Like, yeah, I want to build the Empire State Building. How do I do that with these pieces? So having someone inside Amazon that is partner focused to say like, oh, you want to learn how to use these pieces? Here's a team, and I'll get you connected to the right teams to build the solution you're trying to build has been good. And also they have a ton of funding available for customers to do migrations. So we've had a really great success in 2020, especially during the pandemic months where people were the first half where people were just trying to figure out how to get their servers moved. And they were coming to us and say, hey, we want to be in the cloud. What can we do? And we'd say, oh yeah, we'll migrate all your stuff for free because Amazon will pay for it. There's some rules of engagement there, but we did a lot of fully funded migrations, and they have great programs for that. And I think that at least I'm not aware of them. I don't hear Google and Microsoft having those kinds of programs for the small business customers. And that's really gotten a lot of people excited. I think cloud in general is a virtual land grab. Moving your entire company to the cloud is like moving your house. You're not going to do it every week. You're going to kind of pick a camp, and better or for worse, like your neighbors, don't like your neighbors. You're going to kind of stay in your house for a few years. So I think there's this kind of consensus of, hey, pick the right cloud provider and get people in there to see how it works. And once they're in, they're going to kind of stay. They're sticky. And Amazon's been really great with helping us with the total cost of ownership studies, the return on investment. What does it cost ongoing to run it? How are you going to migrate your servers in? And then helping us, giving away the tools to do the migrations too, right? So all the tools to migrate into the clouds are all free. So they're really trying to fund and open up these front doors to get people in the store, basically, right? To start looking around.
Well, it's good you put a lot of thought in. Amazing how much thought and effort you put into it. I thought for a second you were going to say, oh, they gave me a free year of Amazon Prime.
Yeah. We do get a lot of Amazon deliveries also, though.
Yeah. Now you mentioned in there, it sounds like at least that the partner resources from Amazon have gotten better, more robust. Not necessarily that they were bad before, but it sounds like there's just more coming from them within the last, I think you said 6 to 9 months. And I'm wondering, I mean, how much of that do you think is because at some point in time your company crossed a threshold, and you hit some metric, revenue number, whatever, consumption metric that qualifies you for more stuff, or do you see AWS investing more in partnering generally?
Yeah, it's funny, as you were describing that, I was thinking back to one of the previous podcasts that I was listening from you guys, and I think Matt, you had said it, like, how come the investment in the partner only happens after you hit the threshold, right? The new partners that don't have any spend are the ones that need the help, not the people that are doing $1 million a year, right? And it's funny, when we started 5 years ago, we couldn't figure out the orientation. We fell down, got skin knees, trying to figure out, like, what are we doing here? So there is a development of a partner network happening simultaneously as we're stepping up. But I do think that there is a huge focus this year in 2021 for Amazon's sales team to attach partners to deals. They don't want to be a direct sales team, and they can't scale that way. That's something Microsoft has figured out, early on. Their partner network, they scale with partners, they deploy with partners, and Amazon is really adopting that model. So they want partners attached to everything, and I think it's fairly easy to get in and get involved. We have selected, Ingram as our disty of choice, and I can tell you, inside Ingram, there's a huge push to get partners onboarded, ramped up, introduced to the programs, help them to find out the funding platforms and stuff like that. And we've been working very closely with Ingram to try and help kind of develop some of that stuff and teach some of the lessons we learned along the way of how to be a successful partner, and giving them some feedback to help other partners get ramped up. But there's a whole dedicated army of folks that are coming online to really help partners get going fast. And I think right out of the gate, you would have those resources, even at $0 of spend with them.
Very cool. I want to circle back to one question that you mentioned. So you built your company to be completely cloud focused, and I want you to talk a little bit about how the last year of the whole coronavirus pandemic, how did that put you in a better position and to make it easier to service your customers, since they were already pretty much in the cloud? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was joking with someone the other day. I wish I could say it was planning and foresight, and we knew that this was going to work. All along, I did really like the virtual desktop story. It's less work to manage the endpoint. It's kind of a bring your own device story almost. It allows people to be mobile. It allows you to open new offices and expand. And we were kind of thinking through, the economy's growing and companies are going to be opening new offices, and people want to work from any devices, was kind of the lens we were looking through. And fortunately, that also plays very well to, everybody now has to go work from home. We used to always say, like, hey, if you're in the cloud, you kind of have the Starbucks disaster recovery plan, which is your building burned down, send everybody to the closest internet connection, get back online and keep working. I mean, you could be like halfway through writing an email and just like log back in, and it's all there because there's no on-premise infrastructure or servers or data that's required. And that turns out to also work very well in a pandemic where everybody has to go work from home, and they would just go home and log into their local devices. I would say that we ran into the same problems that many other folks probably ran into, which is people's home networks. I've got a PC from 1999 that I want to work from, and like, yeah, that's great, it's got Windows 7 on it. That's not going to work. Or, the number one, I think, killer of corporate productivity is people's personal Wi-Fi networks in their houses. Have been another great killer of support metrics, right? We're getting a ton of support calls about like, hey, this is slow, this isn't working. Well, plug your computer into the wired network and you'll get better performance. But other than those kind of turning somebody's home into a corporate work environment, everything else was already handled. They had remote access to all their data and desktops. They had the capability to work from an iPad if they wanted to, or their kids' Chromebooks. I actually joke, I actually have it right here. I have one of my kids' Chromebooks that they brought home from kindergarten. They gave them these plasticky Chromebooks that were like $99. Works great on that, right? It doesn't matter because there's no, you don't need any horsepower with the device. The device is really just like a pair of binoculars. It's looking at stuff running elsewhere. And, that's a lot of our sales messaging when we're talking to, CEOs and stuff, but it's really true that you now can go anywhere and the data is secure, the data is available, and it's your working and your DR plan. Other than, sending everybody a patch cable in the mail to plug their computer into their home router, everything else was pretty smooth.
Wow. So the Starbucks disaster recovery plan, that is, okay. So here's a weird question. If you were going into Starbucks as a part of disaster recovery, what is the correct drink to order while you're working at Starbucks?
I think it's got to be something iced, right? Because you got to be pretty chill. It's a disaster recovery. I like an iced macchiato, maybe something like that. Caramel macchiato. Got to have some sugar too.
Indeed. I love it. I had this weird vision of like every company shutting down and everyone trying to cram themselves into a Starbucks all at the same time. And that's kind of funny. So Chris, before we move on to news, tell us just a little bit about things that you like to do. What you said you are trying to get outdoors and do things more. How's the coronavirus impacted you over the last year, and what kind of things do you like to do for fun to keep yourself entertained?
Yeah, I've got a couple of young kids, so it seems like keeping them go back to school, go back to class is kind of my new hobby, is like getting them back in their Zoom calls for first and fourth grade. Definitely I'm an outdoors person, so a lot of hiking, a lot of I actually took the kids camping the other day at a local little campsite. They were so excited. It was kind of like are we going to be okay out here? Can we sleep here in the outdoors? Is this all right? Like first camp out kind of mentality. It was kind of exciting, and definitely have a fun electric bike that I'm riding around. And I try to keep everybody in my office annoyed with horrible dad jokes. I got a running kind of lineup of those we can mix in here or there. And it's just currently working on a home remodel. So as I mentioned to you guys, they were getting a new roof here and trying to just kind of upgrade the house. I think everybody's spending all their free cash flow on home improvements everywhere in the country.
Boy, ain't that the truth. You and I are very kindred spirits, I think. We have an awful lot in common. We'll pick that up later on. All right, well, I think that it's a good place to transition and start talking a little bit about the news. But let me foreshadow for those who are listening and or watching the show ahead. So we've got some news from SYNNEX, Ingram Micro, and D&H. We're going to talk about a story called You and What Army? So we've got a lot of military talk coming up, strategies and tactics. We're invading something. Rich is going to tell us about that. He's our new commander-in-chief for that. We got a great interview that we did with Ted Roller of Zomentum. That's coming up later in the show. Of course, we'll play a little 5 questions with Chris after the second break. And I got a museum pick and tech pick, all kinds of good stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. So strap on in, and here we go. Rich, SYNNEX and Data. SYNNEX and Data. Yes, SYNNEX has lots of data. But we've talked about this kind of stuff a lot over the last few years. No surprise, mergers and acquisitions, but this is a big one. Rich, what happened?
Yeah, this is a blockbuster. Just for the industry in general. Obviously, in the distribution landscape in particular, this is as big as it gets. But really, even beyond that, given how big and important these two companies are, this is kind of a giant story. SYNNEX and Tech Data have announced a definitive agreement to merge. Now, there is a lot that needs to happen before that merger actually takes place, and they're looking at closing the deal in the second half of the calendar year, the 2021. But they have every intent and every expectation of turning those two companies into one company. And when that closes, Rich Hume, who is the CEO of Tech Data today, would become the CEO of the combined company. To my knowledge, they haven't announced what that company will be named or how they plan to deal with brands and so on. But Rich Hume will be the CEO of that company. Dennis Polk, who is the president and CEO of SYNNEX today, would become the executive chair of the board of directors and play a continued and active role from a strategic standpoint in running the businesses. A lot of the logic behind this transaction that they talked about when they announced it on Monday this week, it very much appeals to investors. And so I mean, the efficiencies that these companies can realize here, I think, and the opportunities to take a cost out of the business and so on. I think that's going to be very enticing from an investor standpoint. From a channel standpoint, the breadth of the line card and the product catalog, and in particular, the solution expertise. So both of these companies, SYNNEX and Tech Data, have been investing heavily for years now in solutions and solutions expertise. Because distribution, pretty much to survive in distribution these days, you have to be doing that, and I'll talk just a little bit more about that in a moment. But both of these companies have a great deal of in-house knowledge and professional services capability around security and IoT and analytics and a lot of these strategic and emerging markets. And so they're really going to be able to bring kind of a comprehensive set of offerings out to their partners. Chris, as you mentioned, you're an Ingram guy, and we'll talk about their take on this shortly. I haven't actually spoken this week with a lot of SYNNEX or Tech Data partners about what they're thinking. But obviously, if you've gone deep with one of those distributors, you're probably a little bit wary about disruption and how that maybe affects you. There is always the concern in a merger situation like this that maybe there's some cost reduction effort that results in you losing the relationship with the account manager who you absolutely adore. And so I got to imagine there's at least a little bit of anxiety out there among SYNNEX and Tech Data partners about how does this from a shorter term kind of perspective wind up impacting me. But it definitely turns two companies that were among the 3-4 biggest in distribution into one enormous company, a $57 billion a year company, 150,000 customers, 200,000 products from 1,500 vendors. Together, these two companies are going to be a giant.
I think the real question is, will they have any laptops in stock or webcams? Sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't hold your breath.
What was that?
I wouldn't hold your breath.
We're skipping around a little bit here, but yesterday I had the chance to interview senior folks at D&H and Ingram about this deal, and Kirk Robinson from Ingram, who Chris, was saying that actually they're feeling pretty good. He did discuss some supply chain issues that they're seeing, but that's more the stuff that you read about these days in the business press about commodity shortages and chip shortages and so on, like the components that go into the products that the Ingrams and the Tech Datas and the SYNNEXs are buying. There's some of that going on, but I did ask, like webcams and laptops, and he indicated, Kirk did, that that we're not so much worried about anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's good. Having competition is going to only improve the market, right? It's going to breed innovation. It's going to be better for the IT VARs and system integrators and MSPs like us. Consolidation growth. I think you just got to. It's the people problem, right? I think the warehousing and that kind of stuff will all get figured out. And I think in Kirk's interview with you, he mentioned kind of like when they got bought up by a group there was a lot of hubbub around it, and then it turned out nothing changed at all. Like it was no big deal. It was a bunch of behind the scenes kind of financial market things, but it didn't affect customer relationships or partner relationships or vendor relationships at all. And that was several years ago. So I imagine it's going to kind of go like that. They're going to consolidate. It's going to be some financial integration behind the scenes, and a lot of stuff won't change really. I think it's good at the end of the day.
So Rich, when this merger is completed, will this new merged company be the largest distributor in the channel?
I mean, I don't know that definitively. I just rattled off a bunch of numbers to you. So they're saying, and they sort of couched this in a very particular kind of finance expert kind of way, but they're saying the combined companies will be a $57 billion a year business. And Ingram Ingram Micro just recently wrapped up their fiscal year, and they were just shy of $50 billion. So, going with those numbers, this would be number one from a revenue standpoint.
Yeah, anytime there's a loss of a competition out there, it does make a bigger entity. But what are the cons of this merger? What that could impact the channel?
It's a good question. I guess it does come down to, so first of all, off the top of my head, SYNNEX, particularly in the SMB space, their year-over-year growth numbers have been astonishing these past few years. And a big part of the reason behind that, they like to say, is because they are heavily invested in close kind of consistent, steady working relationships that they don't want it ever to feel like you're working with a big giant company. So, one of those question marks out there is, does that somehow change? This is now a substantially bigger company. Does it start to feel from a partner standpoint like now I'm dealing with a giant company? Are there, they were talking about efficiencies from an investor standpoint. Again, that's one of the things that makes this appealing. Do any of those efficiencies wind up, affecting partners in some way that makes it less appealing to be working with these companies? So I off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that is just flat out not good about this, but there are some things that could happen that might wind up not being good.
Chris, same question to you. What do you see any cons out of this kind of merger?
I was just thinking as Rich was talking previously was the whole Tech Data Avnet kind of merger, and I didn't hear any pros or cons out of that either way. They just kind of blended together a couple of years back. It's been a little while now. I haven't heard any negatives. I think this is probably a subset of, distributor A has some business set that distributor B doesn't have, and together they're stronger sort of thing. I think it's going to be better that way. Whether it be a certain product or vendor set or engineering or solution set, I would think that combining is better. And then I don't know, international footprint, does that change? It's a much bigger. There's probably some MBAs behind the scenes that have a lot more details than I would know. But I think it's better. I always think about comic book superheroes, right? Every superhero has to have a competitor to go compete against, right? So you got to have I don't know, good or bad, but if you don't have that conflict and that competition, you don't have growth. I always think when the Joker stopped being the bad guy for Batman, right? Batman didn't know what to do. There was an episode like that. So I think when you have good competition and there is a new eminent big competition on the market, I think everybody's going to step it up. And I think at the end of the day, that's only going to help the MSPs and bars of the world.
So how many distributors are left, Rich? I count 3 in my head, 3 large distributors anyway. Is that what we have left?
So you're thinking SYNNEX / Tech Data, Ingram Micro, and D&H, right?
Yep.
So there is still, and those would be the 3, I think, biggest, best known broadline distributors out there. Arrow Electronics is still out there. That's a pretty good sized company. And there is, Avnet is still out there, and a very interesting company. This I'm sort of looking ahead a little bit, because when they sold their technology solutions business to Tech Data a few years back, it was in conjunction with a bet the business kind of strategic move on their part to really focus in on IoT and embedded systems. And they are playing a very interesting kind of long game on that right now. And I have an article coming up in I think the May issue of the I should probably check this out, but I know I owe an article to the magazine soon about where they're at on that, and when that comes out, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But they are very IoT embedded focused right now, so they're not really broadline anymore. So the big 3, certainly that a ChannelPro reader would be aware of, are SYNNEX / Tech Data, Ingram, and D&H.
So do we see any more reactions, any more mergers with other companies coming out in reaction to this?
Great question. I wouldn't be, and I don't know very much about Arrow, for example, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear about a private equity kind of deal involving that company, or and it's worth pointing out, Tech Data got bought by Apollo Global Management, this giant private equity firm. That deal was first announced as pending end of 2019, and it actually happened in 2020. Oh, now I just lost my train of thought. Why was I bringing that up? So there is a lot of, and it is a very interesting thing that's going on in the industry right now. Is, from a 10-year perspective, and this has probably come up on the podcast before. You go back, not even 10 years, go back 5 years, 7, 8 years. There were a lot of people who really believed distribution is dead, because everything's going online, everything's going as a service. And what are the two things distributors, are all about? It's like warehousing, shrink-wrapped stuff, and financing. And it's like, it's just not really going to be relevant to people anymore. And, these companies, one of the things you learn when you cover these companies pretty regularly is that truly they are run by very smart people who saw this issue themselves, and they've all kind of pivoted to the change in the industry in different ways. And now we find ourselves at this place where, after years of people saying distribution is doomed, this is like the hottest, sexiest corner of IT all of a sudden, where you've got, Apollo Global Management going after Tech Data and Ingram Micro. This deal hasn't closed yet, but they got bought from their prior owner by a private equity firm. So, would it be astonishing to see more of that happen, and Arrow maybe get bought as well? Not at all. I think there are a lot of investors who like what they're seeing in distribution right now. And I think with respect to SYNNEX specifically, as the dominoes were falling, and so Tech Data, goes to private equity, and Ingram Micro goes to, I think everybody knew something involving SYNNEX was coming. And my, if you'd asked me a week ago, I probably would have guessed it would involve private equity or something like that. And it turned out to be a merger instead. And, there are still those few dominoes standing. And yeah, it would not surprise me at all if a few of them get swept up in this wave of investment in distributors right now.
Right. So last question before we move on. Well, this is kind of a distributor heavy news section, but are they going to keep, what's the name of this combined company going to be? Did they announce that?
To my knowledge, they have not. They have not said, and it's also worth pointing out, again, the deal, there's some regulatory approval that has to happen. The SYNNEX shareholders, because that's a publicly listed company, they've got to okay this. So there are things that need to happen before this deal becomes a reality, and it's going to be the back half of the year before any of that is done. Between now and then, they emphasize, they're each doing business, as SYNNEX and Tech Data, and nothing is going to get kind of disrupted in the short term, and so those brands are sticking around, for some number of months here. But I don't think they've said what the combined entity would be named.
Chris, you want to take a guess? What is the combined company name going to be on the other side?
Man.
You think they're going to just stick with Tech Data? Are they going to just stick with SYNNEX? Are they going to try to come up with something new? What do you think?
I think they're going to go for a whole new name. They're going to completely rebrand with a new name, new color scheme, maybe a mascot logo, and it's going to be called, all the good names are taken already. I was going to say SYNNEX. Let's see, the Magic Wand Distribution Company.
Magic Wand Distribution Company. Rich, what's your guesses? I have 5 actually.
Oh wow, okay. Well, the first one that popped into my head was SynTech, but then that's going to show up in the wrong searches online.
Mm-hmm.
So it probably won't be that one.
All right, so I've got 5. We'll see if any of mine pan out. So I have SynTech Data Next. I've got TechSyn Next Data, SYNNEX Data, TechNext Syn Data, and knowing the creative powers of most marketing departments and companies these days, I think where they're going to land is going to be One Distributor 360.
Yep. You just know that's on a whiteboard somewhere right now.
Guarantee it. I got it. There it is. One Distributor. Well, we'll have to see. I do like Magic Wand as well, so maybe they'll hear this and take some inspiration from this discussion.
I'm curious, you guys' standpoint on, sort of what Rich was asking about, like, are there going to be distributors of the future that don't have giant warehouses that are only distributing products, right? There's one that we're kind of have converted some of our stuff over to that's become very popular. Do you think that's an up and coming trend? Do you think more people will be doing that and ditching the warehouse? Do you think that people like that will just get gobbled up as a new product vendor of somebody else, another merger down the road?
It's an interesting question, Rich.
Could happen, but I think that is a longer term. When you talk to a SYNNEX or a Tech Data, what they want to talk to you about, what they're very excited about, is the solutions expertise and cloud computing and all these things that don't necessarily involve a warehouse. But that the warehouse part of the business, for all the talk about how that model is doomed, that still produces a lot. There's still a demand for all that stuff, and it produces a lot of money. And so I don't think anytime soon you'll see anyone kind of transition away from that entirely. The interesting thing is, the Ingram Micro warehouse or warehouses are unbelievably enormous in terms of the diversity of products and so on that they offer. But if there's any of the big distributors that might be positioned, for that kind of post-warehouse future, they're the one that kind of first comes to mind, because they have invested. When they launched the Cloud Blue cloud computing platform, which was a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago now. At that time they had already sunk $500 million into that. So they've really kind of positioned themselves to really just kind of be all about the cloud as much as anyone else. But I think it'll be a while before anyone bets exclusively on something that doesn't really involve the hardware at least piece of it. Software already probably isn't sitting in the warehouse much.
Yeah, right.
No more box product you're buying at Costco or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I don't see hardware going away. There's so many facets of hardware that distribution is kind of necessary for, and we always get stuck thinking, oh well, there's not a lot of on-premise servers anymore. But distributors sell way more than just on-premises servers, and there are all those companies that are building out gigantic scale data centers that still need that kind of stuff. So I don't see that, but I do see, Chris, another form of distribution that focuses solely on packaging and putting together specialized software bundles to resell. And I know Tech Data and SYNNEX and D&H, they all do that. I do see maybe some other startups as that type of business grows that focus just on that and not on the hardware side. But that's a different form of distribution. But I don't see hardware going away anytime real soon.
Yeah, it's interesting. We got approached by the Cloud Blue folks to put something in their marketplace that's professional services, like an MSP bundle with your services and the Microsoft and maybe an endpoint, right? And then same thing with Amazon. Amazon has a marketplace where they're trying to put professional services and MSPs into their marketplace offering. So buy a MSP offering direct from the Amazon marketplace as a business user. I don't think small businesses, at least, I don't think they're shopping online for an MSP like that. But it's interesting that they're trying to kind of take that business onto a marketplace. I don't know if that's good or bad for us in the MSP or channel space, but it's interesting that it's out there.
It may destroy us all, but it's still interesting, either way. All right, let's move on. So we're talking about SYNNEX and Tech Data merging, and the next two stories are kind of like reactions to that. So Ingram Micro is looking forward to it. But are they really, Rich?
Well, you know what? This was just yesterday. I spoke to Kirk Robinson, who is the U.S. country chief for Ingram Micro. And a lot of what he said, Chris, was just dead on in terms of what you were talking about. That a great competitor makes you better. You've got to up your game to keep up with a big competitor. And so he said, look, they are going to be a formidable foe. The SYNNEX Tech Data combination will be a formidable foe, were the words he used. But as I put it in this article I wrote after the interview, from Ingram's standpoint, game on. We love it. And what he also alluded to the Tech Data Avnet deal from a few years back. and said, that looked like a big issue and maybe a potential competitive threat to us. And he said at one point, right after that, we posted some of the best numbers we've ever had in the company's history. It's like, not that a company like Ingram or D&H or any of these guys sort of need a wake-up call necessarily, but I mean, something like this gets your attention, and it does kind of get you thinking about, well, what do we do to stay on top of this? And so that's the thrust of Ingram's take on this is, yep, absolutely, this is going to be a very big company and a very serious competitor of ours. But in the past, every time we've faced this kind of challenge, it's only made us better. So bring it on, and they feel like they've got the global footprint and the product catalog and the cloud depth. They don't feel like, at least they're not willing to admit if they're concerned about competitive deficits in any areas with SYNNEX and Tech Data. So their message basically was, very interesting deal, but from our perspective, this is not something that we view as a danger or a threat. If anything, it'll be a motivation.
Chris, let me ask you this question. And when I was reading this reaction, I was sitting here thinking, how often do MSPs change distributors? I mean, like, Tech Data and SYNNEX could merge and they could offer a whole bunch of new stuff, but if you're already well entrenched with Ingram Micro or D&H, like, can they do anything that would really make you want to move?
Yeah, I was actually thinking that as you guys were describing the article, and when I read through it, it's kind of like, if it's working, why change it, right? It's something that has to be not just a little bit better, it's got to be significantly better, because it's not just all of a sudden I'm buying something from somebody different. We're neck deep with integrations, with billings, with credit lines. I mean, we keep accounts open with all of the major disties because somebody's going to have something in stock, or just as a hedging model in case something goes wrong, or we're have a big project or something. But we're primarily going one direction, and to like break that connection and move things is a huge project, especially with anything that's recurring revenue. It's very difficult. We are actively going through moving some of our Microsoft licensing from one distributor to another, and it's been a 3 to 6 month project and new integrations, and so it most of this doesn't really apply, to an MSP. It's like I was saying earlier, you're not going to move houses every week. It's a lot of work and effort to box everything up and take your ball and go home.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. Rich, what do you think?
Yeah, well, and it kind of goes back to the whole thing about relationships and so on. So yeah, people get very fond of their distribution relationship, and yeah, if it's working, then I don't know that this would inspire a lot of movement. The question then, though, is just do any of the things that people really like about working with one of these companies change somehow, and then all of a sudden they're open to the possibility of a switch that in a way they might not normally be.
I think there's more danger of them messing something up and shedding MSPs, right? It's almost a boom for everybody else besides the people going through the merger, because if you make any mistakes along the way, you're just going to have to recover.
Right. Yeah, there is a lot of risk to that for sure. Now, does this put them in a better position to attract new customers as over some of the other ones? If it's going to be that much better, do you think?
You're talking about Ingram or?
No, this SYNNEX Tech Data merger. Like, should Ingram be worried that all new customers will go to the bigger fish?
I wouldn't think so. I don't know. There may be, and Chris would probably know better if the issue of comprehensiveness, because I think it's fair to say Ingram's line card and product catalog were probably more comprehensive than SYNNEX or Tech Data individually before. So you put those two companies together, and there's probably something more like parity there. And does that maybe change dynamics in some way so that people are more open to initiating a relationship with Tech Data and SYNNEX together? Maybe. I don't know. Does that sound right at all, Chris?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And we don't deal with all of the product sets on anybody's line card. So I don't know that I see that, that matrix come together of what it is. But I'm sure there's some boxes being checked there that they didn't have before, and maybe some things that the other folks don't even have, like an Ingram. It's just what's the market, the addressable market for who needs those products, right? That's going to be the trick of knowing that part.
Yeah, for sure. So there's one other reaction, Rich. Let's go ahead and go to that one too, and that is D&H is planning to stay the course, I suppose. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and in a way, staying the course is very much in the DNA at D&H, if you will. This is a 104-year-old company that has adapted to all sorts of different changes in the industry, and part of how they've done that is by thinking long-term, having sort of long-term strategic plans, and staying on that course. And it's not that they don't make changes. I spoke with Dan Schwab, one of the co-presidents of the company, yesterday. He said, our plans evolve, but they don't change dramatically. That we don't want to kind of whiplash people around that way by making some sort of abrupt course change. And so that's the essence of their take on this transaction. Is we knew last week what we were going to be focused on over the course of the next few years, and this week it's the same things. We are not going to be making any significant changes in response to Tech Data and SYNNEX coming together. They made big, very public bets on cloud computing and Pro AV. They've been rolling out professional services. They were very early and remain early proponents of esports as a big channel opportunity. All that remains the same. They're continuing to kind of do that. And at the same time, they will be keeping an eye on SYNNEX and Tech Data and looking to see if there are competitive openings. One of the things that Dan Schwab and Kirk Robinson both said, and this comes up a lot when you talk to competitors about a company that's been involved in an M&A transaction, they said, there's integration work that has to happen after a transaction like that. Companies can kind of take their eye off the ball, that partners can maybe feel like they're not getting the attention that they used to get, and so both these companies are going to be looking to see if there's some opening for them to kind of jump in and siphon off some partners. But that's really about as much, I think, as D&H is going to be doing. That might qualify as being different. They, in Ingram's case, they sort of feel like, well, we match up very well against SYNNEX and Tech Data together, and so we don't worry about them in that way. And D&H is a little bit different because they are they are on a track to be a roughly $5 billion a year company versus 50 for Ingram, 57 for SYNNEX and Tech Data together. So that's it's still a pretty good sized company, but a smaller company. And they're kind of curious to see the degree to which that difference in scale actually becomes a competitive edge for them, where that you've got these big broadline distributors. Does it become an advantage to them that they are not that big, that they are a little bit more focused? They go deep on a smaller number of vendors, and they have the resources to provide more training and sales assistance maybe than these giant companies can. So, again, no big strategic initiatives planned around capitalizing on that potential advantage, but another thing that they'll be kind of looking at as this new deal evolves.
Chris, I'm going to send it over to you. Do you have any comments on D&H's reaction here? Most of it's kind of what I would have expected.
Yeah, it's kind of what I would expect as well. We don't do a ton with D&H. I'm not super familiar with them. I hear them. I know they're a distributor that's out in the marketplace. We just don't run across them that much. But it's kind of we're more on the cloud side, so we're not doing a ton of product shipping really.
Yeah, they did point out one thing that I found interesting that we haven't discussed the ramifications of this yet. And they talked about the as one of the cost saving measures is the reduction in staff. And I'm sitting here thinking, between SYNNEX and Tech Data, there is going to be a lot of overlap in personnel. How bad do you think that's going to be?
Well, I mean, you would think again. So they're combining the partner base. So it's not like they need dramatically fewer employees to support that many partners. I think where it starts to get interesting is in the functions like marketing, for example. And one of the things I wonder about, just because in normal times, I usually attend meetings of the Tech Select, partner community and the Varnex. SYNNEX's Varnex partner community, and it's like, how do those come together? There are definitely areas where it probably doesn't make sense from a long-term perspective for there to be two different groups of people doing some of these things. But I don't know that it'll be a bloodbath from an account rep, or a technical evangelist, professional services kind of standpoint. Because to support that many partners, logically, you just need a lot of people.
Chris, what do you think? Do you think there's going to be a big fallout and reduction of staff?
Yeah, I mean, the trick with any merger is getting the groups merged together as fast as possible. I came from another VAR previously that got acquired, and you hear all the rumblings of like, who's my manager and who do I report to, and it just causes a lot of just chaos in the organization, and that causes like stalls here and there. And a couple of times we've been approached to mergers and acquisitions, and the only kind of comparable thing I have is I always just like, no thanks, because we're just going to keep focusing on what we're doing. It's just a distraction. And so getting out of that distraction mode, or get past the press conferences, get past everybody like wondering what's going to happen to their job, and get back to work as fast as possible is the only thing that's going to be relevant there, I think.
Yeah, I think every employee at Tech Data and SYNNEX down the road is going to have a scheduled meeting with the two Bobs.
Yep. Yeah. What do you do around here?
Hi, Bob. Bob. Yeah. What is it you do here?
I wouldn't say I've been missing work.
Yeah. I got it. I haven't seen that one in a while. We're for those who are listening, we're referring to a classic movie called Office Space. I'm sure most of you have seen it, but if not, run, do not walk to your nearest streaming service that has it, or video store if it still exists in your area, and rent that movie. It's fantastic, well worth the watch. So there's a lot of quotes here. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of numbers. I want to make sure everybody knows, if you're listening, go to channelpronetwork.com, find the show sheet for episode 180. And we've got links to all of these stories. You can kind of dive through, and then you can start yourself thinking about what the ramifications are. And if you have some thoughts on what you think this is going to cause, or what you see happening as a result of this merger, let us know. podcast@channelpronetwork.com is the email address. So send us a note there. If you're watching on YouTube, same thing for you. Go to the description area below the video and open up that area, and we'll have all the links there for you to explore, as well as all of these news stories and the next story we're going to talk about. Rich, Lance Corporal Matt reporting for duty, sir. General Freeman, you and what army? What are we doing? What are we invading?
The cybersecurity market. If you are a ChannelPro and you know how important security is to SMBs these days, and all the research out there that shows if you're looking for a good way to shed customers, screwing up on security is a nice way to go about it. There is an enormous opportunity, and in doing security well and thoroughly, and a lot of risk in not doing it well. But the big question that comes up is you on what army? So I mean, you can't. Most of the people listening right now cannot do it all on their own. They don't have the resources. They don't have the people. The security analysts are very expensive. Security operations centers are very expensive. So it's kind of a given that you're going to be combining your own people and tools and resources with some outsourced stuff. The question, though, is just, where do you draw those lines? What do you outsource? What do you not outsource? How do you kind of integrate that and make that work so that you can bring a coherent and complete cybersecurity offering to your customers and deliver it in an effective way? And that's what this You and What Army article from the most recent issue of ChannelPro is all about. And so just as a for example of or some for examples of places where the lines get drawn. I mentioned Security Operations Center before. I mean, millions of dollars to set up and operate something like that. You're almost certainly going to outsource that piece of things. And then you start getting into areas like, well, do I white label that or not? How transparent am I about the fact that somebody else is doing that for me? But you're almost certainly going to be working with some sort of SOC outside the company. But then there are other things, compliance is a big issue, a big part of the cyber security story, and especially if you're doing business with customers in a vertical where you have some exposure there, but maybe not a lot. You don't really know that industry very, very well. Outsourcing some piece of compliance so that you're getting your HIPAA or the CMMC, which is this defense industry. I mean, if you need to be absolutely certain that you're keeping your company and your clients in compliance with regulation, then outsourcing that. There are certain functions in security that nobody really can do well for themselves, like audits or penetration tests, especially. And so that's an area I think where you're almost certainly going to outsource that kind of thing. And then the question just becomes, well, what do you absolutely keep in-house? And there are a lot of different opinions about that. I don't think there's any one right answer. I think what you'll see a lot of is anything that feels consultative is something that the ChannelPro is going to want to deliver themselves. We've had Scott Beck as guest host on the show, and he's spoken at our events before. And he's very transparent with his customers about all the different things that they outsource. But he's very intent on positioning himself to his customers as the quarterback who is running this team operation. And I'm the guy who selected the best in the industry for you, and I'm making it all work together. And I'm the one who's really advising you on what you need to do to keep your business safe. I think that is an approach. Michael Goldstein, who's been a guest host with us before, we most recently saw him, I think, at the holiday show a few months back. What he has done, which is kind of interesting, is sort of draw the line at the edge of the network. And he said, if it's inside the firewall, basically, I want to be doing it. And if it's outside the firewall, I will outsource that. So different models for where you draw the line and how much you kind of tell the customer about the fact that you're not actually doing it all single-handedly. And then there's some advice in the article too, as well. I mean, once you've kind of made those decisions, choosing the vendors, managing your relationship with the vendors becomes very important, because these outsourced companies are really an extension of your team. And so you really need to, as one of the people I interviewed said, you really need to interview these vendors exactly the way you would interview an employee, and think about that as a hiring process. Basically, do I feel good about hiring this outsourcer as part of my team? And then, drawing up clear division of labor, a shared model for working together, cultivating those personal relationships, so that you have the phone number to call into that isn't an 800 line, and you're just going to get whoever answers the phone. Some of the things that you would want to do, obviously, to make this third-party company really kind of feel and function like a part of your own.
Lots of stuff there to cover. Chris, Rich, you said that opinions are going to vary on this, and there's no right answer. I disagree. Whatever Chris says next is the right answer. Chris, go ahead.
We struggle with this too, and it's interesting. You mentioned specifically CMMC. Just before this podcast started, I just got off a call talking about a customer about that. But I think broadly, we deal with small businesses, and small businesses want the security, but they don't want to pay for it. And if you're already in as a managed service provider, if you go back and knock on their door and say, we want X dollars more to now manage your security, the usual answer is, oh, we thought you already did that for us, right? So having the sales conversation of bridging of where the MSP services stop and where the MSS, how many S's we got now, SSPs, security services start, is a difficult conversation, right? So we've had some conversations with our folks about that. The silly way that, because we're talking to CEOs and small companies, they don't know the tech world. I usually describe it as like, look, when you're in an MSP agreement with us, we're your handyman and we're your maid. We clean stuff up, and we, if the door has a creak in it, we put some oil in it and we make sure everything's running smooth. But we're not your alarm company. And if you want an alarm company at your house, you've got to pay for monitoring of the alarm company. Just like if you put in you buy the alarm system, you put in all the right sensors, and then you pay a monthly fee to have it monitored and for someone to show up if there's a problem. Some homeowners like that, and some homeowners don't want that. But that model has kind of clicked with a few folks. They go, oh, okay, I kind of get it. Yeah, all right. They still don't want to pay anymore, but they kind of understand what the differences are in that silly analogy. But what seems to be driving this now is not the individual customers, it's the news stories about, oh, my competitor just got breached, right? And there's been several between video cameras and, everybody that's different issues that have been out this week with compromises. Even huge companies are having issues with this. And I think you're going to start seeing some standardization around regulatory rules getting pushed all the way down to the small businesses where they have to have compliance. And that a lot of the conversations we have is customers are just curious about it. Hey, are we secure? Is our Exchange server secure? Hey, you don't have an Exchange server. You're in the cloud already. It's already fixed, right? We had a bunch of those conversations a couple of weeks back. But now we're starting to see things where relatively small businesses, the customer I got off has maybe 20 employees or 15, 20 employees, but they have to be CMMC compliant, which I did not know what that was until last week. But it's a relatively new industry standard around security, and there's NIST and a bunch of them that are out there. But I think you're going to see some real something with teeth start to happen. And this customer came to us because they said, look, the federal government will not let us do business with them anymore. We are locked out until we're compliant. We have to do these 3 steps to get the gate unlocked again. And that's what drove them to spend the money to start to look at it. Of course, they just sent us the checklist and said, here, just fill this out for us. And I said, well, we're not an audit firm. I can't do this for you. And by the way, a lot of these things in here are not IT related either. These are policies and procedures, like keep your front door locked, keep a visitor log. Like, we don't do those things. You need an audit firm. But I think you're going to see folks start to be more interested in it. They're going to see their friends, coworkers, competition affected by stuff, like we saw with the cameras and the Exchange server stuff in the last couple of weeks, and the SolarWinds and everybody. It's every week there's another major one that's happening. It's happening with more and more regularity, and I think customers are they're intrigued, but I still think at the small scale with SMB, they don't understand what they're paying more money for or why they should do it until something's broken. In the last 30 days, we had 2 new customers come to us, and the call started like this: our entire network is crypto locked. We need to be back in business in 2 or 3 days, and we don't have any backups. Help us, right? And so it's just changing enough that things are getting broken enough that people are starting to respond, I think is what we're seeing.
So Rich and Chris, one of the things that this article is really talking about is, where does it make sense to outsource? Where does it not? And let me just throw this question out there. What is the benefit I see of outsourcing a lot of these security related things is that it puts the onus of responsibility off of you, right? I am finding someone who I believe is good. So your example with Exchange kind of sparked this, like, well, you don't have to worry about Exchange because it's in the cloud. It's Microsoft's problem. Why take on any of this responsibility internally when you can make it somebody else's problem?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We are not going to build a SOC. And the first time someone said SOC to me, I looked down at my shoes, but a security operations center. I mean, we have a hard enough time in the SMB space, like somebody's firewall is down at 2 a.m. They don't want a phone call to me telling them their firewall's down. They probably also don't want a phone call and saying like, hey, you have an outbreak across 10 PCs and someone's trying to actively hack your network. They're not going to care. They just be like, fix it, right? So we would outsource it for us 100%. And we're looking at partners now to do that with. And then it's just the balance of, will the customer pay for it, right? We found a great partner. We got all the integrations to work. The other key that's in there that I didn't hear you mention too is like getting whoever that is that's monitoring it access to fix all this stuff. So now you're sharing customer login information, VPN tunnels, server access, data access with third-party vendors. That's always been a hurdle for us too, is, okay, we outsource it, we give this vendor access. What if they come in and break something? Or what if they don't respond fast enough? It's on our invoice. The customer's going to come back knocking on our door that something got broken. So there's still some hurdles to overcome, but yeah, we would definitely not build it in-house. Just like we're not going to build a distribution center or, our own cloud. We're going to partner with people that are smarter than us and do it. We are definitely pro partnering.
There has to be some advantages of doing it yourself, though. Can you explain what those might be?
I think that there's folks out there that think we can buy a piece of software and we can, project some monitoring statistics on the wall and have it integrate with our PSA, and it'll just be a bunch of tickets and we can go resolve them. The problem with that, I think, is having the staff, right? But I think it's probably the thinking is it's going to be cheaper for us to do it ourselves. We'll hire the people, we'll buy the product, we'll run it, we'll train our staff. The problem is you've got to deliver on every single one of those items, and it has to be more cost effective. Otherwise, you're losing money doing it. For us, it's just not the right fit. But I imagine there's customers out there to say like, hey, we're just going to buy, I don't know, Splunk and put it on a server and collect everybody's logs, and if an alert goes off, we'll figure it out. But that's not really a complete solution either, right? Because who's gonna staff it at 2 a.m? That's usually the biggest challenge.
Gary likes to be up late.
Yeah.
I don't know if this resonates or not, Chris, but I would also think maybe some people would answer to Matt's question, the control aspect. And I know this comes up a lot in cloud computing, this idea that the customer calls me, they've got a problem. If it's something that I can control in-house, I can now fix the problem. Otherwise, I have to call the vendor, the cloud vendor, and I'm dependent on them to address it. And like you were talking about, what if they're not responsive? What if they screw it up or whatever? That so maybe, Matt, one piece of it is, well, if I'm doing it myself, I know, that certain standards of quality are being met and things are going to get done, in a timeline I'm comfortable with. And I don't have those dependencies on outside companies that I can't control.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Well, interesting stuff. A question I'm sure all MSPs are going to be grappling with, especially as security becomes more important. And Chris, I do agree. There's a lot of S's between M and P now. I think we need to set the precedent today that we no longer have to call out every S. We just sounded out longer the more S's we had. So instead of MSSP, it's MSP.
It sounds like snake jazz.
Indeed, it does. All right.
Yeah, I think you got to predict what the next S is going to be if we're naming things ahead of time.
Take a guess. I'd like your foresight into this.
I would say, man, my Scrabble skills are lacking here. Shield. I don't know what.
Shield. Managed security, managed services, security, and soup provider. That's what we're gonna go.
Sneaker net. We're going full circle back to the beginning.
Sneaker net. I love it. All right. Well, thank you much, General Rich, for this article. Good stuff. We're going to put the link in the show notes and at the description area on YouTube for you to check it out. I'm real excited. We got an interview coming up with Ted Roller of Zomentum. Unfortunately, Chris, we had to record this yesterday, so Chris wasn't around for this interview, but it's a really good one. Stick around for that. But we will have Chris on the other side of the break as soon as we get back. We will be right back. Welcome back to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. We got a great guest interview lined up for you today. He has over 25 years of experience in the SMB channel, where he's had numerous tech companies. He's also been recognized by numerous organizations for his contributions to the channel, and his channel programs have won a multitude of awards. Today, he's the channel chief at Zomentum. Please welcome Ted Roller. Welcome, Ted.
Hey, how are you, Matt?
Good to see you. It's actually been a long time.
It has been a long time. It's been, well, obviously, it's been a long time since we've seen anybody face to face.
I'll say at least a year. I think it's been a little bit longer than that, though, but it's really good to see you. How have you been?
I've been doing well, surviving the non-traveling life and hoping that we're done with that here pretty soon. I like being on the road and seeing people.
I think so. I think you mentioned before we got started here that you are on the road today, right? So you're doing some traveling at least.
Yeah, it's Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It's not as glamorous as some of the travel that we get to do, but it is nevertheless not home. So, things are getting better all the time.
Excellent. Glad to hear. So for those who may not be familiar with you, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Oh, so me, Ted Roller, I'm a former MSP, 15 years in Ohio. And then I took a year off and was sent back out into the world as somebody on the dark side of the channel working for the vendors. I was channel chief for companies like Intronis and LogMeIn, and then decided, I guess 7 years ago, to start my own business called Get Channeled. And what we do very simply is help small SaaS companies who want to go to market exclusively through the channel accelerate that effort and kind of try and help them get it right the first time so that they can grow effectively, so that they can serve the MSP community effectively and create an everybody wins sort of scenario.
Oh, so you went to the dark side. So can we add Sith Lord to your long range of professions and titles?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know about Lord, but definitely Sith somewhere.
Sith somewhere. So what brought you back over to the channel side?
Oh, I mean, I was always on the channel side, but just went to the vendor instead of being the MSP.
Instead of being on the MSP side, I follow.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool.
Eyes for sure.
And so what does Ted like to do for fun when he's not doing channel related things or slaughtering Jedi in his free time?
Hey, ouch. I over COVID, I took advantage of the opportunity to become Scuba certified. So I am leveraging every opportunity I can. Next opportunity is end of April to go get under the ocean and look at fish and coral and all that good stuff. It's been a lifelong goal of mine that just took a backseat to work and being everywhere. And now I get to do that. I also like to hike a lot. So the last trip was out to Yosemite, but I'm just trying to see the world and enjoy the natural aspects of it.
Awesome. I have done scuba before. I'm not scuba certified by any means, so we had to go with somebody. That's a lot of fun. What's the coolest thing you've seen under the water?
Yeah, it just happened back in January. I'm under the water off of Key Largo, looking down because that's kind of what you do. That's where all the fish are. And I look off to my left a little bit and there's a 5-foot barracuda close. And that was interesting. And then I looked a little further left and there were 100 of his brothers and sisters right beside him. And suddenly there was this moment of, oh, this is scary. And then there was the moment of, there's nothing I can do about it. So they're beautiful and I might enjoy them. And it was exactly what I was kind of hoping to get out of scuba diving. So it's wonderful.
Wow. If I was encountered by hundreds of barracudas, I think the first thing I would do is turn and try to swim away the other direction.
I think that's exactly what you're not supposed to do. So I don't know, but they didn't come after me. And the guide we were with at the time said they're not aggressive. The people, they have a reputation, but because they can hurt you, but they're not really aggressive. So you really don't need to worry. But still, I didn't know. So it was fun.
I'm glad that they did not consume you. So that way you can be here today to talk to us. And unfortunately, we're not here to talk about scuba all day, which would be fun because I would love to learn a little bit more about some of the things you've seen and done. But we're actually here today to talk about like sales and marketing, because that's something you've done for a very long time. Rich, I'm sorry I forgot to ask you. Have you ever been scuba diving before we get started?
I haven't. With or without an instructor. I've just not done that.
But you do. Okay, so you haven't been scuba diving, but you do have a lot of good questions for Mr. Ted Roller, I assume.
That I can take care of, yes.
Should we do that while scuba diving? Can we conduct interviews under the water?
I haven't done that either, actually. I have a hunch most of my questions would sound a lot like glug glug. I don't know what kind of, and the answers probably would as well.
For sure.
Although, you know what, though, Ted, I was just thinking, when you got that scuba mask on and you do talk, because you can talk while you have those on, but you do sound a lot like Darth Vader. I think this is all coming together with that whole Sith Lord background you got.
That whole thing. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Rich, why don't you kick us off here and ask Ted your first question.
Okay. And like Matt says, we're talking about sales and marketing for MSPs. And as you know very well, this is a pain point for most MSPs. Your typical MSP is very strong technically. They don't have a lot of background, a lot of training in sales and marketing. And so they're really kind of figuring out as they go along. And I mostly want to kind of get, suggestions, recommendations, best practices from you, but maybe as a starting point, I mean, what are some of the things that you tend to see MSPs do in the sales and marketing realm that they really shouldn't be doing? What are the most common mistakes out there?
The experience at Zomentum over the last couple of years has been eye-opening for me on this front. Here's the truth of MSP sales. MSPs are actually pretty amazing salespeople, but they have a misguided definition of what sales is. When MSPs who have not spent time being professional salespeople think of salespeople, they think of used car salespeople and all of that kind of sales mentality. MSPs are consultants. Let's just put it out there. They have a better way to manage technology for their customers, and they consult with their customers on how to do that. They have a very evolved sense of how to do that. They do assessments of their customer locations. They identify all that is good and bad about a customer locale. They make recommendations in order to fix those things and put together a plan, basically a diet plan for the network that makes the network effective and as low cost as possible. And then they put their money where their mouth is, and they bill that low cost on a monthly basis. And if they're good at it, they make a lot of money in the process. That's a very evolved, that's how you sell fighter jets and Boeing 747s and, all kinds of stuff. It's just focused on the network. That's what MSPs are great at. They're great at consulting. They're great at teaching. They're great at evolving the technology platform of their customers, but they don't see any of that as sales. So it's more of a problem of understanding what your goals are from a sales perspective and what your methodologies are, and leaning into those strengths and doing it again and again. Because if you're really good as an MSP, you really do want to let as many customers know not necessarily how good you are. You don't want to brag about it, but you want to let them have access to your capabilities because you're making their business better every day.
And it's interesting you say that, because I keep kind of saying, hey, we're talking about sales and marketing, but what I pretty consistently hear from MSPs is if you can put me in the room with that sales prospect, I can usually close that deal. Right. So you're right. I mean, they really do know how to sell, even if they don't realize that makes them good salespeople. But it's getting into the room maybe where the challenge is. The number one source of leads in MSPs and beyond in the SMB channel is referrals. This is kind of, what that word of mouth you were pointing to. Exactly. So, what do you think about that as a strategy? Is it a mistake to lean on word of mouth and referrals too much?
Yeah, it's a requirement, and it's an ever evolving requirement to create lead flow for yourself. As a business. Here's the thing. There are the same number of MSPs, according to Jay McBain, today as there were 7 years ago, but they're bigger and they're more effective, and they have every tool they need in order to create growth, and they're using them. And so we've got bigger MSPs who own more market share, who are going up market and selling to larger customers, and figuring out ways to make themselves stand out and be differentiated, as well as creating lead flow into their business that they're managing effectively and converting into new customers. And if you don't do that, let's face it, if you're a smaller MSP and everybody else is getting better at selling, the opportunity to earn word of mouth business shrinks. And the risk to keeping your existing clients, everybody makes mistakes from time to time, and it doesn't take very many mistakes in order to put your customer relationship at risk. Even through the best of intentions or the best of efforts, sometimes that happens. If there are more viable options out there for your customers to go to, if you make a mistake and everybody's hunting harder, if you're not hunting harder, you're going up the down escalator, and your business is going to shrink as a result. It is absolutely in your best interest to sell, but it is also in your best interest to put together mechanisms that allow you to teach and use that as the way that you sell, allow you to consult and use that as the way you sell. But at the end of the day, as an MSP, we did this. We were very sales and market. My old MSP way back dawn of time, but we were a very sales and marketing focused organization. One of the things that we did that we were wondering whether it would work well or not was we did airport advertising. It was cost effective in Southwestern Ohio. We put up an ad. It was all entirely focused on competing with the national IT service companies and saying the one thing they don't have that we do is a local address. And what happened as a result of just putting that ad out there, it was attraction, it was just an attraction ad. But people who had seen us over the last 10 years were suddenly saying, man, these guys have arrived. They look good. their game is strong. I need to talk to them again. And larger clients who we had reached out to in the past who felt like we were too small called us back and said, you guys aren't small anymore. Okay, sure, you're right. Absolutely. We're huge now. But that turned into a lot of business. And we were still consultative. We were still doing all the things we did before. We were still rolling out the managed services platform, but we were creating a mechanism for them to see us and come to us. A second thing that we did, just as an example of way back then, is we did printer repair for all the major manufacturers, HP, Xerox, et cetera, and so on. We were warranty authorized for all of them. So we didn't ever make a dime doing any of that. I mean, we got paid for it, but it was a loss leader every time. But our salespeople would go pick up the printer, take it back to the office, get it fixed, and the salesperson would then take it back out to the new prospect, deliver it, set it up, and leave a business card and hope. And most of the times got the opportunity to have a quick discussion with the decision maker about what other things we did. That landed us so many clients. It was still consultative. So I know I'm running on here, but consult your way into new opportunities and figure out tools to give you the conversation. Don't try and sell them the used car. Try to solve a small problem for them that leads to a conversation about solving all the problems for them from a technology perspective.
So, one of the questions that comes up a lot with marketing and lead generation is, how much is enough? How much should I be spending or investing? If, especially a smaller MSP is now competing with larger firms, and as you were saying, really kind of needs to be in hunting mode most of the time. I mean, what kind of guidelines, what kind of advice can you offer in terms of, what they should be investing in lead gen?
It's different for every MSP. At some level, you have your vertical focus, or you have the specific technologies that you pay attention to, et cetera, and so on. So there's no one right answer, but the answer is play to your strengths. Where you compete the most, invest the dollars. Where you don't necessarily compete as well, look for organic ways to grow. Join the Chamber of Commerce. Join a nonprofit organization, move into being on a board position at a nonprofit organization where you can charitably add to your time, go volunteer at local schools, get to be known in the community. A lot of MSPs do this very well. A lot of MSPs never do any of this. But it's free, it's time consuming, but it's actually kind of rewarding at the same time. It gives back to the community, and it sets you up as a community-minded business, which has all the value propositions in the world from the standpoint of word spreading about you. But then whatever your core strength is, wherever you're wholly differentiated, invest 10 out of every $100 that you make on marketing that strength and driving exactly the customers. Be very rifle oriented on that. Get the customers you want with the dollars that you spend on marketing, and use community involvement and engagement to drive awareness that isn't necessarily as specifically focused.
Ted, depending on the size, do you recommend that MSPs and try to do all that themselves? I know you talk about community development. Is there a fast track to that? Do you recommend that they try to spend the money on themselves and do it themselves, or work with a third party that generates leads for you?
Both work. Third parties are expensive, and at the point where you've reached the organizational maturity level that you need leads in order to succeed. Like, if we don't have leads, bad things are going to happen. You need to use those additional sources to drive additional leads and feed the machine. But early, just set your goals out there. I'm a small company. I want to work with other small companies because we talk to each other better than others. That's one strategy. So we have experience in the dental space. We've got 7 dentists who we work with right now. We know all about EagleSoft software and all the other things that they use. So we're going to focus on that. We're going to go to 100 dentists in the area, and we're going to try and win business there. We're going to go to the vendors who serve that space, and we're going to build referral organizations and so on and so forth. I think that's kind of how you win in a more organic manner. But by the same token, you can go to a dental trade show and spend some not huge dollars there and work a booth for a couple of days, and all the dentists will come to you, and you'll probably be one of just a few MSPs in that space, and you'll look good because you're there and you know what you're talking about. I mean, none of this is rocket science, but I don't think you need to spend money on lead flow until your organizational goals for growth require additional effort on lead flow that you can't do internally.
I want to circle back to the story you told about putting up that ad at the airport. Are there larger lessons, like general principles that people can, as opposed to just thinking, well, yeah, I should maybe put an ad, up at the local airport too. Are there sort of broader principles that can be derived from that in terms of, for example, you very successfully made your small firm look bigger. What's the lesson learned maybe from that experience you had?
It's interesting because I keep learning this lesson every 2 or 3 years, and I've learned it most recently with Zomentum. One of the things that Zomentum does, and that we did incidentally by putting that ad in the airport, was it scales up the level of professionalism of every document that you share with a client. And let me tell you what that means for Zomentum, because it makes a huge difference for our MSPs. When our MSPs send out a quote or an assessment or any kind of document, the receiving customer gets a microsite. So they get an email, they click on it, up comes a microsite, and they're looking at the quote, and they're able to say, you can create a quote that says you can choose level A, level B, level C of our managed services program. They pick one, the other two disappear from the quote, and that's their selection. I want one of these 3 laptops. Well, actually, I want 4 of them. Okay, change that to 4, pick the one you want, and that part's done, and move through there. You can add a video which can do virtually anything you want it to. Want to explain this quote so that you can consume it and make decisions on it without having to ask me questions personally. I just, if you want to do this at 10 o'clock at night, here's a video that explains what all this means and how to make the decision and what you need to think about. And then you can e-sign it and move down the road. That is a considerably evolved engagement from a quoting perspective, and it makes your business look big. But more than that, big isn't necessarily better, but capable and effective and attractive to work with and organized. All those things come as a result of putting documents that allow people to make decisions faster in front of them and knowing that you're helping them save time in the decision-making process. It's really cool. So the broader thing is, look professional, look better than everybody else with everything you put in front of your customers, and you're going to close more deals. It's on a subconscious level, they're going to want to work with you more than they want to work with the other company. The other thing I would say about that is, if your logo looks like it was created by your 8th grader and it's on a very sophisticated looking quote, you send mixed messages. So focus on your brand, because your brand matters more than ever as an MSP. And it has for the last 10 years. Brand value has gone up and up and up. Understand that that's important. Spend money on professionals there for sure to make your brand look amazing. Look for people who win awards for their brand work. They're out there. And make your brand, invest in your brand. It'll pay off again and again and again.
So on the professionalism scale of, say, 1 to 10, where do we feel about those guys who stand on the street and twirl signs with your brand on it? Where does that fit?
Total. And those guys, I mean, their balance is amazing. They can spin, they can do, some of them are doing flips and stuff. Like, they are bringing it, and they're hungry. So you got to give them the love.
So airport ads, professional quoting, and guys twirling signs on the corner. Perfect.
If you remember nothing else from this interview, folks, that's your takeaway.
Pizza and computer repair, all right here on this corner.
You know, the other significant thing about the story you were just telling, or the scenario you were just describing, Ted, is how automated it is. And I wonder if MSPs are taking sufficient advantage of marketing automation these days to just kind of increase the scale of what they can accomplish around lead gen.
So over the last 5 years in particular, I have seen the most evolved, most operationally mature MSPs do things that I never dreamed I would see out of the MSP marketplace. There are examples out there of how you can really grow an MSP business in a truly staggering way, and how you can make a huge difference and have a great impact on your customers, and buy the boat and the condo out in Vail and all that other stuff as an MSP. There 10, 15, even 20 years ago, it was a very lucky MSP who made real money and succeeded. Today, everybody has the availability of the tools to be able to stand out and be awesome. Those who are using marketing automation, I see a lot of these guys. I'm gonna throw a brand out there, but I see a lot of these guys around the Robin's ecosystem. I don't know whether it's what Robin does. I'm sure that's a big part of it, but it's also the fact that they have committed to spending time, effort, and money and in fixing or driving their marketing efforts. And, the company that markets all day long and commits to it is going to have better results than the companies that don't. Take that a step further. The company that engages with somebody who's really good at it and drives that needle forward is going to be that much better. And I am seeing some pretty impressive stuff out there. There are also a lot of MSPs who haven't gotten there yet. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but if they do, they'll see the results.
One thing we haven't really talked about much, and I'm sure people are kind of wondering about, is what role should online play in their marketing efforts, whether that's SEO or pay-per-click. How effective is that? How kind of core should it be to something that everyone is doing?
I mean, that's a very costly way to drive awareness. And it's today's equivalent of getting a billboard downtown on the side of the highway. And there's a lot of expertise associated with making sure you get in the right place at the right time and make that impact. I don't think that's where most MSPs should start. I think that's kind of what they evolve a few years in, where their brand, you have to have an effective brand, and then you have to have the ability to remind people of that brand and to take action on working with that brand. So build a brand first. Get most MSPs, although that's less and less every year, are regionally focused. On a national focus situation, this whole story changes. But when you're regionally focused, when people become aware of your brand, then they need reasons to be reminded of it in order to commit to doing business with you. And that's where SEO makes a huge difference. That's where social efforts make a huge difference. It's where actually blogging in the local community makes a huge difference. All those things matter. But I think that's not necessarily a B task, but it's a second step or a third step or a fourth step once you get the brand out there and you built a lead flow engine that's more direct to the people you want to target.
Yeah, so you touched on social media there. That was the next thing I wanted to ask about. So that too is something that you get to eventually, but you've got to kind of have to walk before you run, sort of a deal.
Let's face it, if your social media has zero level of engagement with it, you drop a Facebook page out there and then you post nothing. You do whatever you do and then you don't do anything with it. It's just another, rowboat with a couple of oars floating alone out on the ocean. And you just, it's a hindrance. Does anybody remember what the password is to our Facebook site? No. Okay. And, that doesn't work. And if you don't have the people to commit to that effort, you don't have the story to tell that's driven by your other marketing mission, it's just not helpful. All it does is make you look small as opposed to making you look powerful and capable. So get to the point where you have the revenue going to commit resources, put together a plan, execute on that plan, and let it augment your existing effective marketing efforts in order to, and at some point it's about how many of these do we close? It's how many of these do we touch is the first question. And when we're touching enough, but we have a close rate of 10%, how do we get that to touching the same number, but having a close rate of 20%? Because we just doubled our dollars into the door. And that's where SEO and social and all those other things can get you to number of touches very, very quickly and make a difference.
Yeah, we've had similar conversations with others, and one of the big things that they say about social media that I highlight that you said is that, like, don't start it and then not continue, like, because that can really make you look bad too. Because if you have a potential customer trying to look you up to see what you're all about, and then they come across this Facebook page that died 4 years ago, it doesn't give a very good impression, is what you're trying to say, right?
That's exactly right. It's okay, they don't care about this. What else don't they care about?
Very true. So let's say I'm a kind of a smaller but semi-established MSP in the community, and I want to ramp up my marketing efforts. What would be like the top 5 first things that I should do to really get started?
Talk to 100 different people and you're going to come up with 100 different top 5 to do. I can only work from the playbook that worked for me. We went from being a small 2-person MSP to 40 employees and $6 million a year in 4 years. And I got lucky in a lot of different ways. But what we did, I was in a community where volunteerism was incredibly valuable. And I ended up sitting on the boards of a bunch of different charitable organizations. And quite frankly, the people you sit on those boards with are the people who are very often consuming technology. So you get to know all those people, and then you end up in the circles that they're in, all the while helping the people who are less fortunate, driving food and healthcare and all the things to them. It makes a huge difference. And, Zig Ziglar said this a long time ago, and I think somebody else said it before them: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I felt like caring about the community made me feel good about everything I was doing in the community, but it also made the community feel good about doing business with me. That set the roadmap for us to scale from working within a 50-mile radius of that local community to working across the state. It gave us the awareness to start working with K through 12 education and expanding that brand across 80 different K through 12 school systems. And we didn't have that relationship at that point with all, schools 250 miles away from us, but we had the reputation and we had earned the trust of the schools locally, and they promoted us beyond and got us out into different places. So we were leveraging word of mouth in a very real way, but it all came as a result of being trusted. And, we have, one of my companies has a lead generator who sends out emails all the time that says, how much do your customers trust you? And it's really a great question to ask, whether you're trying to sell something or whether you're just trying to figure out how valuable your business is to your market. If you can't say my customers trust me completely, then you're probably not doing the right things. And if you can say that, then you have a platform to go forth and do social, to do SEO, to do a million other things and get the word out there with the support of the customers you already have.
And I think a good way that you could test to see if your customer trusts you is ask them if they want to go scuba diving with you.
And hope it goes well.
That's awesome. Well, unfortunately, I think we are out of time. Ted, I want to thank you so much for coming on and joining us here today and chatting with us. For those who want to get in touch with you and learn more about Zomentum, where can they go? How can they find you?
Zomentum.com to find out anything about Zomentum. And very soon here, virtually any trade event will be at the ChannelPro events when those fire back up here soon. So that would be a great place to come see us and get to know us more. But my email is ted@zomentum.com, and you can reach me there just as easily as anywhere else.
Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure to look you up. And when you talk about live events again, we all get so excited here at ChannelPro because we cannot wait. Thank you so much, Ted. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to wrap up the show with some of our regular end of the show features. I got a tech pick and a museum pick for you. And Rich will tell us what happened earlier in the week that we may have missed. And then he will get out his crystal ball, gaze into it, and tell us what might happen next week, which he's right, a good 15% of the time. So what will he get right this week? You'll just have to stick around to find out. We will be right back. And welcome back to part 3 of Channel Pro Weekly. Rich, great interview with Ted Roller from Zomentum. Really appreciate him coming on. Any takeaways from that interview that you'd like to highlight?
Well, just that, as he kind of got into different best practices and things to do and avoid and so on, if there's an overarching theme is that there really is ROI on thinking about this stuff and making it an important part, even if it's not why you got into the industry. Taking it seriously is very important if you want to grow your business, and there is a return on that investment of time and effort. The better the more you understand it, the better you get at it, the more effective you are at choosing the right mix of tactics and strategies and so on. The more easily you're going to be able to add customers and revenue. Yeah,
for sure. I also realized that I kind of misspoke, because I was trying to come up with a joke off the top of my head. And I said that you can speak while scuba diving. And I suppose that's true, but I meant to say you can't speak, but you can sound like Darth Vader with the tank sound, I don't know. You've never been scuba diving, but if you, Chris, have you ever been scuba diving?
Yeah. I'm a master certified scuba diver, actually.
So, like when you're kind of breathing through the tank and you kind of breathe in and out, it kind of sounds like that Darth Vader-y sound.
Yeah,
exactly. That's what I was referring to, I guess. But there are like full-size scuba helmets that I suppose you could speak in. Right.
Yeah, everybody in the aquarium, right, when they're talking to the kids, they have the mic in the thing and you can hear them.
Right. So Rich, even though I somewhat misspoke, I was correct both ways. Now that rarely happens, so I'm pretty excited about that. Good stuff. Well, we're joined again with Chris. Oh crap! You told me how to pronounce it, and I can't remember.
Ploessel.
Chris Ploessel here on the other side. Thanks for sticking around with us. We're going to play a little game with you coming up. We have our 5 questions segment. I know you listened before, but I'm going to introduce it for those who might be new listeners or viewers today. So 5 questions is a segment where Rich and I have a little fun game with our guest. Rich and I will come up with 5 questions off the top of our head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is the rule, is that we are not allowed to come up with them in advance. We have to think of them on the fly. Well, no gotchas, no nothing to embarrass you or anything like that. It's just to have a little fun and learn a little bit more about you. You ready?
Ready.
All right, Rich, I'll be nice and I'll give you the first question.
Thank you, sir. I just learned that you're serious about scuba diving, Chris. So where is your favorite place to go diving?
Well, favorite, I like locally here. I got certified and I live here in Southern California. So Laguna Beach here has a great little dive shop that is still a shack by the side of PCH, and it's great. And you can go get your scuba tank filled there and walk right to the beach and be in the water in about 5 minutes. And there's lots of local sea life. So I like that. I will tell you, one of my most memorable dive trips is I actually went to the South Pacific to, depending on how you're pronouncing it, either Truck Lagoon, or it's actually spelled with a CH, but everyone says truck. And it was a major military site, and there were a bunch of military battles that were there, and there's a lot of sunken boats, and it's kind of like the Everest of scuba diving. Everybody goes there to like dive through all these wrecks, and it's amazing. The diving was awesome, but the most interesting thing was I never really liked history in school. It was kind of like, yeah, it happened a million years ago, whatever. On this dive boat we were on, every day in the morning, you had breakfast and they gave you a history lesson. They said, we're anchored over this boat. Here's where it was. Here's what role it played in the war. Here's why it was sunk. Here's the military ship that sunk it. Everything that happened, what's inside of it, where it was going, what it was carrying. And that was like the most interesting history lesson I ever had, was out of that dive trip, was learning about all these wrecks. And I've got a picture of me at 100 feet under the water, sitting inside of a Japanese Zero on the flight deck of a sunken boat. It's just crazy to actually be able to live some of that older history and be able to touch it. And that really brought it alive to me. So that was a good diving trip.
Very, very cool. Very interesting. I love scuba diving. That's a lot of fun. It's something I haven't done in a long time, but I'd love to get back out in the water again. It's cool that you have easy access to it. Here into the plains of northern Illinois, not a lot of great places to go scuba diving. But there are some schools around here. I think you can do it like in a pool or whatever. How long? This is not my question, but how long does it take to get certified? Just out of curiosity.
It's pretty easy. I mean, the basic certification, you could do it on a vacation in a couple of 3 days, right? The different organizations, Patty and now, we have different kind of curriculum, but in 2 weeks you can kind of get it done. I think generally they break it up over a month, and you do some classroom work, and then you do some pool work, and then you do a couple of dives with an instructor, and then you're kind of basic certified of kind of easy diving, and then from there there's lots of different pathways of wreck diving and deep diving and mixing your own tank gas that you breathe and all sorts of craziness that you can get into.
Yeah, like the diving part, I have no interest in trying to mix my own gas for my tank. But I'm glad that there are people who are interested in that to keep those of us alive when we're under the water. Okay, so my question number 2 is you caught that I was wearing a Street Fighter t-shirt.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you played when you were younger, back in the arcades, back many, many moons ago when dinosaurs also roamed the earth. What was your favorite character in the original Street Fighter 2 roster?
Yeah, I was a fan of Blanca, who was the big, hairy kind of, I don't know what we call it, an ape kind of looking character, Brazil rainforest something kind of thing with lightning bolts shooting out of I guess. That was an easy one because you could electrocute everybody that came close to you. So that was my kind of my go-to.
Yeah, that was a good character. I don't know what the heck Blanca was. It's kind of like an Amazonian rainforest beast kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. So if my character, I like Blanca a lot. I would say that was probably my normal go-to, but I liked Guile a lot, or Guile, or whatever the hell you want to pronounce too.
Yeah, the military looking guy with the crew cut, right?
Yeah, with like that flat top thing. It would you could do the sonic boom things. He had that reverse sweep that would sweep and then it would come back and it would hit again, and you could just totally tear people up with that. So I was known for being cheap with the sweeps.
Yeah, you get in the edge of the screen and you just kind of live in the corner, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So which was a lot of fun. Rich, I know did you ever play around in the arcades when you were younger?
Well, I'm quite a bit older than.
I'm not saying for Street Fighter. I'm just saying arcades in general. They existed when you.
So
were
yes, absolutely.
And what was your go-to game?
So I am old enough that, in fact, in my arcade hanging out days, they were really just making the transition from pinball machines to, so I was doing this heavily in the Space Invaders kind of era. Well, Tetris was more of like a home game already at that point. Gosh, I don't know. Now I'm Space Invaders is the one that I'm remembering.
Well, let me ask you about pinball. You said you like pinball. I love pinball, by the way.
Yeah.
One of the things I've been doing lately is going back and learning about old pinball tables and watching them get restored. It's just fascinating how complicated those machines are. What was your favorite pinball table? Does one come to mind?
No, there was one. No, I would have Galaxy something or other. I can't remember exactly what it was.
No worries. Well, I'll send it over to you to question number 3 for Chris.
Okay. And I'm going back to the diving thing again, though, because you don't know this, Chris, but when we were interviewing Ted Roller before, he told a story about how he was diving once and found himself unexpectedly in close proximity to something like 100 barracuda. And so what is your kind of closest encounter with a potentially dangerous creature underwater?
Yeah, I've done a few shark dives for sure in 2 different kind of areas. One where they basically took a giant, like a trash can you'd have in front of your house. I don't even know how are those 40 gallons, 80-gallon trash cans, and they fill it with chum, and then they put it in the freezer and they freeze it, and they use the trash can to pull it down with a rope to the bottom, and then they pull the plastic trash can off, and there's like a chumsicle down there, and it's just bait frozen, and the sharks it just gums everywhere. So they're like, we got the chumsicle down, you guys all sit and have lunch, and then once the sharks come, we'll have you get in the water with them and go take a look, right? So this thing's sitting in there oozing bait and blood and everything in the water. And then we're eating lunch and you come outside and it was night and day. Like the water is just like a flurry of like shark fins and they're all attacking this thing. And it was kind of nerve wracking. I got a picture floating around somewhere, but what we did is we just got in the water and go straight to the bottom. It was very shallow and there was kind of like a rock backdrop and we kind of just all sat against the rocks and we could just watch these sharks come in and like just attack this frozen chumsicle. And it was interesting to watch them eat, to watch them behave with each other. I never really felt like I was in danger. You know, it's not like the surfer movies where you're just paddling along and the shark comes from the deep. You can kind of see it coming. But the more I've been out in the ocean, the more I've realized that they're just kind of like puppy dogs. You know, you just kind of like, they get close and you can kind of just push them away and that kind of stuff. The other time we were kind of hooked on a reef where there was a very strong current pushing us. And the best way I can describe it for radio, I guess, is kind of like human kites. We were kind of tied to the reef and the current was pushing on us like you were a kite. But the reason that we were there is because this current pushed nutrients and smaller fish up from down below. And then the sharks would just patrol back and forth and just pick them off. So we would just watch the sharks come along and pick off tuna and barracuda and all sorts of different fish that were hanging out there. And it was interesting to just watch their behavior and see them. And never once did somebody, you know, get attacked or anything. At least when I've seen them, it's a lot of fun.
Very, very interesting. I've never done a dive with sharks. That sounds like something I don't know if I want to do. So my question number 4 to you. You said you like to hike. So here's the hypothetical. You're lost in the woods. You've been lost in the woods for weeks and you have to start hunting your own food. What is your go-to forest critter and how would you cook it?
That's a good one. I like that. You know, I have eaten some weird foods in my lifespan. So I think the easiest go-to things are the insects, right? You pick up the ants or maybe a beetle or two or a grub. They're easy to get to. You break open a log. It's probably disgusting to eat a grasshopper without cooking them. But man, that's easy pickings right away. And you just kind of put them all over the campfire, roast them up, heat them up a little bit. And you got some crunchy chips to eat on the way. I actually bought a package of like fire ants from Brazil or something. They ship them in a can and you can kind of eat them like candy, sort of. They're not that horrible to try.
It says that right on the package. Not that horrible.
Not that horrible. It's like this podcast. Not that horrible to try. There you go.
Yeah. Wow, I could not have asked for a better response to that question. That was awesome. Rich, question number 5 to you.
You know, you're talking about woodland creatures and so on that you might want to eat, and it kind of came to mind. I mean, you're in Southern California, so like you're not that far away from Joshua Tree. Yeah. What is the hottest place you have ever gone hiking?
Yeah, so that is a good question. I have actually hiked in Joshua Tree. I've been in Death Valley a couple of times for visiting, but I haven't done any extended hikes. Growing up, I did quite a bit of mountaineering and hiking, and I was on top of one of the local mountains here. It's kind of the reverse of what you're asking, but it made me think of it when you said hottest place. I was on top of Mount Whitney, which is kind of in the continental part of the U.S. here, the tallest mountain until you get to kind of Alaska and outside the continental U.S. We were up there and there was this guy in kind of like jogging shorts and like a really thin t-shirt and it was like freezing cold. Like, what is this guy doing up here? And he's like, well, I just finished running from Death Valley to the top of Mount Whitney, which Death Valley is the lowest point in California and Mount Whitney is the highest. So he actually ran from the bottom. He's like, yeah, I'm just going to turn around and go back. So I'm not sleeping up here or anything. And it's hundreds of miles. I mean, that's multiple days this guy was running. That is crazy. He went from the hottest place on earth to something that was capped with snow and he was going back to the desert. That's crazy that people are out there doing that sort of ultra marathoning sort of stuff.
Was his last name Gump and did he look a little bit like Tom Hanks?
He had like a beard. Yeah. No, don't know.
Very crazy. Well, thank you so much for playing 5 questions with us. That was certainly insightful, and I'll have to figure out where get your resource for ordering edible insects online. That sounds interesting. All right, we're going to move on to our next segment, which is my museum pick. So for those who have been listening or watching for a long time, know that I have I like to call it a fine hobby of collecting old computer components and electronics. My wife says I have a serious hoarding disease and need professional help. Either way, it is your benefit to see kind of this old stuff and talk about it in its place in history. until I get rid of it all, which is slowly but surely happening because I have to listen to my wife. Otherwise, she's going to kick me out of the house. All right. So the one that I picked, I just pulled out of a machine today. And I thought, I don't know if we've talked about one of these in a while. And I think the last time we did it was a slightly different discussion. So I'm going to lift it up to the camera. And for those who are listening, I'm going to describe it. So this is a CDR-W drive from Creative Labs. So this one was manufactured in May of 2001. So it was in that time period, the very, very, very early 2000s. And I wanted to talk about this one briefly because I do remember at the time that the CDR-W standard was not necessarily new because that got ratified in 97. It was really expensive. There was a few drives in 98, but rewritable drives wasn't very common by then. This one, if I remember correctly, came in a bundle deal with a sound card, and it was one of the more cheaper ways at the time to get a rewritable CD drive. And this one is also not the first, if I remember correctly. And again, if I'm wrong, my memory is not as good as Rich's, so I can't think back to 2001 as well as he can. But there were not a lot of drives capable of 4X rewriting. But this was one of the earlier ones, and certainly one of the more affordable ways to do so. So this is an 8 read 4X or 8 write 4X rewrite, 32X read speed. And you know what I miss, Chris? Remember when they used to put headphone jacks right on the CD drive in the computer, so you could actually just plop an audio CD and listen without having to like interact with any software on the computer, which is kind of a fun thing. And then later on, as CDs became less and less important, it became a really nice cup holder, so you could just eject the drive and set your drink on there. It worked pretty well for that. So that's my museum pick. Now, so for those who are listening, it's like a gray, like that old brownish beigeish computer color. It's surprisingly in good shape. It's got the little indicator lights on there when it was busy. But yeah, I picked this because, I got to tell you, I can't remember the last time I needed to burn anything to a disc or even read a disc at this point. But it happens on occasion. So that's my museum pick. Chris, you got a bunch of these laying around?
I actually had one of those. I have a very fond memory of those, of installing them in people's computers. It came with the Sound Blaster card. And as I remember, that still has jumpers on the back of it if you flip it around the other way, right?
It sure does.
Look at that so you had to set for that giant cable is the IDE cable, right? And you had to set the interrupt. Man, I don't even know IRQs and the interrupts with the jumpers manually on the back of it. And I think it also came with like a pair of beige speakers, I want to say, like tiny little.
Yeah, a lot of the creative kits were bundled with speakers, and I think I showed those off on an earlier episode or maybe before we went to video, but I do have an original pair of the Sound Blaster SB16 speakers.
Yeah, so yeah, batteries.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you took a couple C batteries, or you could get an AC adapter for them. Not all packages came with those, but they did bundle speakers in with a lot of them back in the day. Very, very cool stuff. So Rich, you had, I'm sure, had a desktop with a CD burner at some point. Did you ever burn CDs?
Not a bunch, but I did. Yeah. I mean, and I definitely remember the headphone jack. That I just remember what a minor miracle it felt like at the time. Hey, I'm listening to music on my computer. And,
yeah, it was very cool stuff. Chris, did you ever use a lot of? I remember I was very excited when rewritable CDs came out, because I remember back in the day you'd burn a lot of stuff to disk, and sometimes it was just like I got a file that's bigger than what a zip can hold, and so it was like you ended up wasting a lot of blank write once CDs. So I was really excited when the rewritables came out. Did you use a lot of rewritable discs?
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I remember burning things to CD, in the Napster years, right? But that's definitely after all this stuff you're talking about. And I remember the thing I remember is the numbers going up. Like there was the 2X, the 4X, the 8X, 6X, 12X, and I was like, oh my god, how big did it go? Like the CD's gonna burst. It's spinning so fast in there, or whatever. And I remember having big spindles.
You say that, but as they started to hit the 52X speeds, some CDs did explode. That's why they ended up backing it down to 48.
Yep. Yeah. And I remember having big spindles of blank media sitting around, right, and thinking I'll never use this all, and then all of a sudden they're all used for something. I don't know what I was burning to them back then. I mean, we weren't putting install files on them. I'm not sure we were burning CDs for the. I do remember burning CDs and then them not working in the car or in other because they weren't compatible, right? They weren't the right format to play music players.
Yeah, and some of that was the software you used to burn them. I remember that made a big difference whether or not it would work in a car. I remember I really liked the idea of rewritables because I would before I went into mini disc, and that's a whole different thing that we've talked about on the show before. But before mini disc, I would burn CDs to listen in the car, and I liked the rewritable. The one thing that I didn't like though is that it took forever to erase a CD. It was always a big pain in the butt because it took like 30 minutes or something like that to erase the disc, and then you had to go and reburn it. And that was always a pain. But yeah, fond memories of back in the optical media days. So that leads me to my tech pick. So I like to play a lot of that was then, this is now. So optical media is still a thing. It's certainly not widely used in the computer world as it had been. But there are Blu-ray burners that you can get for laptops. There's external ones, and then there's internal drives like the one that I'm showing off here. So I decided, like, well, if you were going to go out and get the ultimate media burner today, what would you use it for, and what would it be? So I'm going to share my screen for those who are watching. If I can find my tab, there it is, right there. It is this guy right here. So this is the LG WH. Oh, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. WH16N S60. It is an internal Blu-ray drive with Ultra HD Blu-ray playback and something called M-Disc support. So 16 times BDR read and write capability, 16 times DVD DVD-R write and rewrite capabilities, all kinds of stuff in here in this particular drive. So why get a Blu-ray burner? Well, primarily I would assume that Blu-rays are used for two primary purposes. One, to actually, for the nefarious who like to rip and burn Blu-ray videos. I'm sure you could find a use for that. I don't encourage it, don't recommend it, but I'm sure this could be used for that. It's also, you can also get blank Blu-rays with a pretty high capacity, so it could be used for kind of a backup and archival system. Probably not in business. This is not where you're gonna want to do that. But if you have a lot of home videos, maybe you would want to burn those to Blu-ray, and you could fit a lot of them on there. I don't see a ton of use cases for it these days, but Chris, can you surmise what a Blu-ray burner would be used for?
Well, I can tell it's been a handful of years, but when I worked at a corporate job as an IT director, we actually had a Blu-ray disc burning like CD changer, you can imagine, but it held like 3,000 of these things, and it was for a backup. The idea was that it was kind of, you're talking about the rewritable. We were looking at more of like a write once, read many worm sort of thing, and we were using it to store financial data. Better than having a tape library, right? Because we weren't streaming these things off to clouds to back them up. So we had a replicatable thing, and it would actually, it looked like a big hard drive away. We could put files to it, and it would write the disc and fill them up. And for every disc it wrote, it would actually write two, and it would spit one out of a tray, and then we'd put it in a fire safe. So that was kind of the DR strategy instead of having a bunch of tapes laying around. But man, there's so many better ways to do that now. I just bought a server. I forgot what make and model it was, but it had a DVD burner in it. I was like, why would they even put this in here? I don't even know why they're shipping this thing. I couldn't even find an operating system on a disk to put it in there to install it. I'm not sure why it's there. So yeah, I don't think these days in business there's much reason for it unless you're in the AV world.
Yeah, it could be in the AV world or doing something specific, like you're burning videos for clients because you do video photography or I don't know, something like that. I guess the primary reason, probably the rewritable part, I don't know, a lot of people would really use these days maybe, but the playback side for sure. Like if you have a library of Blu-ray movies that you want to play on your computer, well, you'll need something like this in order to do that. So I guess that's of course a reason to have it. And you know what, Blu-ray burners, they used to be real expensive. Like this one, I think this one has the M-Disc support and the 4K HD, so it was a little less than $100. Like I remember, even a few years ago, these were still a couple $100 to add to a machine. So not all that unreasonable. So that is my tech pick, the LG, whatever model number I said it was, Blu-ray, internal Blu-ray drive for a desktop, and then of course my museum pick, the Creative Labs, also some convoluted model number that doesn't make any sense. Check those out. Rich, it is your turn to tell us what we might have missed over the last week, and then of course to look ahead and surmise what we might see in the near future.
Well, with respect to what you might have missed in the last week, a great thing to do to keep up with that is look out for our In Case You Missed It post, which appears every Friday on ChannelProNetwork.com, written by our own James Gaskin. This week he's going to be talking about a new secure asset management service from Socksolder, a new and interesting work-from-home security alliance between Fortinet and Linksys, and an inspiring true story about your government at work, ladies and gentlemen. It may soon become legal to hold a Viking funeral pyre in Maine because the state legislature apparently doesn't have anything else better to be talking about right now. James will have the details for you on that. Coming up next week, not a lot on the event front, the conference front that I'm aware of, but there is going to be some security news that'll be interesting, and I've got actually an interview tomorrow with somebody from Dell. I'll be kind of checking in on what's new and coming up from Dell. I have a hunch that's something we'll be talking about a little bit on the next episode of the show.
Sounds exciting. You're not going to want to miss it. Want to give a big thank you to Chris Ploessel for joining us here on episode 180. Chris, I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, had a great time. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. And for those who want to get in touch with you, learn a little bit more about you, where can they go? How can they find you?
Yeah, RedNightConsulting.com is our webpage. Red like the color, night like the time of day, no K in it. RedNightConsulting.com, and we're lots of info on us there and lots of videos and all kinds of good stuff. I always like to close with bad dad jokes. You guys have a new any good?
Those are the only kind of jokes I know. Go for it, man.
Well, yeah. I went to the zoo recently with my kids, but there was only one dog in the zoo. It was a Shih Tzu.
I love it. I love it. I'm taking that as my own. You'll never get it back. Give us one more.
I started watching a new TV show. It's a streaming series. It's only about origami. But of course it's pay-per-view.
That's the best. I love it. Who doesn't love those kinds of jokes? Those are the best.
You got to get them to the end to make everyone come all the way to the end of the podcast to get them, you know. It's a new closing.
I love it. Yeah, Rich, we got to have Chris Ploessel just record a whole bunch of them so we can just interject one at the end of every show. The dad joke segment or something like that. I don't know. We'll have to talk about that off the air. So thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate having you on. I'd love to have you back. It was a lot of fun. Please don't be a stranger. All right. And what else should you do, folks? You should subscribe to the Channel Pro Weekly Podcast. It's available everywhere podcasts are aggregated. So you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere that they're. Anywhere you can find a podcast, you should be able to find us there as well. If you like watching, you can subscribe to us to our channel on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, and then you got to hit the little bell thing to get notifications, and then hit whatever else Google makes you do these days to subscribe to a podcast, because it seems like you get more and more steps every single week. But do that, and then you'll never miss a show. Love to have you there. Leave a nice comment. Podcast@channelpronetwork.com is our email address. So if you have anything you want to say, anything you want to add, please send it to us there. And of course, ChannelProNetwork.com is the place where you should be going each and every day. Set it as your homepage. You'll find the latest news, articles, white papers, podcasts, all the information you need in order to stay abreast of the news and make your business more profitable and better, and service your clients better. Important stuff. ChannelProNetwork.com. Don't miss it. And of course, check out our events schedule coming up. I know we do have another digital event coming up, the April 7th, I believe. You can find out more about that at events.channelpronetwork.com, or on the main website, hit the events tab, and you will be magically transported there where you can learn about that event and register. Join us. It's absolutely free of charge, and will learn a lot. I guarantee it. Rich, what's the event that's coming up on the 7th? What's that one called?
That is our first of two this year, Managed in Cloud Services Summit events, and it is April 7th. And yeah, like you said, you can get all the lowdown at events.channelpronetwork.com.
Yeah, that sounds like something that would be relevant to our audience and that they might want to know.
Yeah, it was. We went way out on a limb that this might work.
It might, and you want to know that stuff, folks. So make sure you you register, and we will see you then. And of course, big thanks to Ted Roller for joining us for the interview. Big thanks to Chris Ploessel for joining us, and we will see everyone in episode 181 next week. Take care.